right, so today we're gonna make a pottery wheel project. Normally with the bat, you wanna get your surface lightly sticky. So just a little bit of water, enough to make your clay tacky that it's gonna suction down. Also, sometimes bats get dirty, so this is a good step just to clean off your bat and get it ready. I like to do an X marks the spot to help me visualize the center. And I'm just gonna pop it down enough that it's gonna create that suction. And you can see it's not gonna go anywhere with that suction. All right, so the first step is called coning. You wanna make sure that you create a slip surface. So sometimes I like to just let the clay build up this slippery surface and I leave it on my hands. I try not to get rid of this. I actually will rub it in and leave it almost like a lotion or just a barrier for my hands. Also, if you ever start to feel your clay burning, almost like like a floor burn, that's your cue that you need to get some more water. All right, so coning, I'm going to put my elbows either on my legs or on my trays. For some of you who are taller, it might just be about putting your elbows next to your rib cage. When you cone, you wanna press down and even through the middle. It's gonna naturally come up on its own because I've allowed this space in between. As I go, I start at the bottom. I'm keeping myself really square. Notice my nose is right over my clay. It's also important to remember to breathe. You have to have oxygen to have strength. It's more about hand strength. It's really my full body. So my arms are involved, my back's involved, sometimes even my legs get involved. It's called coning because it looks like a cone. So think of a traffic cone, wider at the bottom, it gets thinner as it goes up towards the top. It's also starting the centering process. So it's got a little wobbles, but for the most part, it's in the middle of my wheel. All right, next I'm gonna move on to centering. I call this the karate chop method. So my right hand is gonna push down. I'm gonna use my shoulder and my back to help me. Once again, my nose is over my clay. This alone, though, is not gonna do anything, so I have to get my left hand involved. Once again, elbow's gonna be by my side. It's almost like I'm shaking hands with my clay. I'm gonna be using this back part to push in, and I'm gonna be using my thumb to push down. It's important I keep my karate chop hand right next to my thumb. If I have a gap, that clay is gonna come up between. As I go to push down, it's gonna start to form this little donut-like shape. That's what's gonna rest in the back of this left wrist. Once again, it's important to breathe, so breathe in. As you breathe out, you push down and in. This is the stage where I say you're gonna turn into a little hippie. You're gonna take your breath in, you're gonna close your eyes, and you're gonna hold everything nice and tight. I put my elbow on my hip bone to even use my hip or my leg to help me push in. And then once again, I use my shoulder, my back to help me push down. So I'm gonna close my eyes. I'm gonna breathe out and hopefully everything's gonna be nice and still. You know you're centered when there's no wobbles and there's no shakes anywhere throughout your clay. All right, next is opening. You have options for opening. Once again, your elbows down, your arms are on your trays. I like to find the middle with my thumbs. Keep your thumbnails together and press straight down. That's option one. Sometimes if you have a larger amount of clay, you may have to use your longest finger, your middle finger. If you do that, you don't want to get off center. So you're gonna leave your elbow down, you're gonna leave your left hand on the side, you're gonna lay your right thumb on top, and you're gonna push down with that middle finger. Nose is right over the clay. All right, normally we wanna leave about 1/4 of an inch. So the way you can test this, let me dry out that little bead of water. You can take your needle tool and you can put it here in the middle. You can move your finger down to where the clay is and you can pull it out. It should be about the thickness of your finger. That's how much you wanna leave left. About 1/4 of an inch or about the thickness of a pinky finger. I just made a hole though, so I want to make sure I compress it. So I'm just going to slide my finger through and try to fill that in really quick. All right, so this is open. I want to make something with a flat bottom. So imagine like a cylinder or a mug. I'm going to go ahead and keep my middle finger and I'm going to pull it back straight towards myself like it's a hook. So I'm going to hook it underneath and it should be casting its own little shadow. If I want a taller form, I don't do this very wide. If I want something wider, I can keep pulling it back. I'm gonna stop right about there. Typically, I don't go any bigger than the size of a sponge. All right, when you pull, you wanna pull slow to where you have a bunch of rings. If you pull too fast, you'll get a spiral. I'm gonna go ahead and compress with my sponge before I start to pull. All right, so now I'm ready for pulling. My goal initially is to make this as tall as I can. I wanna get as much height. When I pull, because of gravity, the clay is naturally gonna wanna fall outwards. I have to battle that by moving inwards. So elbows to my rib cage. I'm gonna have my left hand on the inside, my right hand on the outside. My thumbs are gonna touch, so my hands move together. I like to start by using the tips of my fingers to create a channel. But then the rest of the time, I'm gonna use the flat parts of my fingers to make it go up and in. The first couple pulls can be the hardest because your clay is really thick. So I like to spend a little time at the beginning to smooth out what's called like a double rim to help with my transitions. The clay is the thickest down here, so I have to press harder at the base. As I move up, I ease my pressure, but I don't change my speed. All right, I want you all to see how my elbows are in. Look how close I am to my clay. I'm directly over it. I'm gonna smooth out that rim because like I said, as I pull up, a lot of times that's the most awkward part to begin with. All right, tips of my fingers, flat parts of my fingers. What I should be seeing is a bunch of rings and not spirals. All right, I'm gonna show you how to pull with a sponge. So sometimes when you have really stiff clay, pulling with a sponge can be a really good way to make sure that you have enough pressure without getting caught in your clay. So I'm gonna use this on the outside. I'm still gonna lay my inside thumb on top. Got a little hard chunk of clay at the top, so that'll be a good demo for trimming in a little bit, but that's kind of what's throwing me off. All right, so use some more moisture. I always start by getting under that thickest part. Gonna go ahead and pull it up. All right, so another tool we can use is called a rib. When I pull, I can bow this, and I can use this as a way to help me create smoothness and evenness. As I go upwards, it collects some of that slip. So it's important that if you need to do another pull that you add some of that back in there. All right, so this is probably as tall I can get it, but I can add some shape to this. So let's say I want to turn this into something wider, like a bowl. what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my hands nice and flat like paddles. I'm gonna go ahead and start by getting under. As I pull, I'm just gonna slowly change the angle. Notice how my body position shifted with the angle. So I was over here because that's where I want my clay to go. I had a professor once teach me that your clay will follow your nose. So I want my clay to go wide, so I had to move my nose over to the direction I wanted. All right, I'm gonna go and move back to my rib tool. She's feeling a little bit uneven, so I'm just gonna hold it nice and still. See if I can add some compression. My rim is definitely off, so I'm gonna use this as a time to trim it. To trim it, you can use your needle tool. Go directly through your side and pull that off. This ends up going into your slot bucket to be reclaimed for later. I'm gonna smooth out this. I'm gonna also take my sponge, smooth out the inside. Maybe smooth out the outside. I also like this opportunity to create some shape. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of a little bit of that thickness so it's less I have to do later when I trim it. I typically like a bell shape, so I'm gonna go ahead and go in. Maybe push that belly a little bit more. Then I wanna create a rim here, so I'm gonna do an indentation. Sometimes I'll use my nail to make like a hard line. I feel like those work really well with glazes, glaze transitions. A lot of that detail work can be added in the trimming process. So if you don't feel comfortable doing it when the clay is plastic and wet like this, you can wait till it's more leather hard. All right, I always think it's really important to look at the profile of whatever you're seeing. So really stepping away and seeing it from the side. I feel pretty happy with it, so I'm gonna go and stop. I'm gonna grab a wire tool. To use the wire tool, you wanna make sure that you're close-ish to your bowl, that it's gonna stay nice and tight. Keep your thumbs down. I wrapped it around my fingers to get it to the size that I needed. I'm gonna pull straight back. For me, I like to just leave my stuff on the bat until it gets more leather hard. It's easier for me to move it. I cut it once. I'm probably gonna have to cut it again later, but I should be good to go. Now, if you ever struggle to get your bats off the wheel, this is a little trick I learned. Find your bat pin. You can use your needle tool to help you pry it off. And that way you can move on to your next beautiful project on the wheel.